Hey there, Husker fans. Pick Six Podcast back. Happy April. It's April 2nd. We don't have to tell any stupid April Fool's jokes on the show. Sam McEwen along with Evan Bland. Elvin covering a lot of baseball, so-so baseball from Nebraska baseball, also a little bit of football. Nebraska basketball still in the crown. They play their second round game tonight against the Hoyas of Georgetown. When I was a kid, I'd always watch ESPN, and they had, I think they played at the Capitol Center back there, and the cheerleaders would always be going, "Let's go Hoyas," and they're just over and over and over. And of course, Georgetown was the best team in the country, so they were on TV all the time. So I remember that chant. They're playing late. It's a late night game out in Vegas. We'll see what happens. Evan, how are you as we move into April? We're into now week. What are we into? Week 2 of Nebraska football camp.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
And fun note, I read these look-ins about other Big Ten teams or other teams on Nebraska's schedule. I did Michigan State for tomorrow, and Michigan State started practice on March 18th. Their head coach spoke, and then nobody spoke for 13 days, and then they spoke yesterday. Why? Why do you suppose that was?
April Fool's Day? Really?
All the reporters were covering the basketball program.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah.
And then they waited till they came back. Yeah.
That's fun.
So the quarterback talked on practice 7, and so do the coordinators. That's how they do it at Michigan State. Nebraska is not quite the same basketball school, so when we go to football practice, there's like 40 people there.
That there is.
In week 2.
And Nebraska basketball is playing later into the season than Michigan State. How about that? That was the nugget that I saw. First, I think, April basketball game ever for Nebraska.
I believe it.
So here they are playing a game when Nebraska is approaching halfway through spring ball in a year when there is no spring game. Like, what is happening in the world at this point?
There's a volleyball spring game.
There is that.
The new spring game.
People are, you want to see the new outside hitters and the middle blockers and everything else? Like, check it out on volleyball. Sorry, you get the skills comp on the football side.
Are you going to – is any of your family members or extended family going to take the $50 tour of the football facility?
No, I don't think so. That drone tour that they gave out online was pretty good.
It's excellent.
Last year. Like, I don't know how you necessarily get better than that.
I guess you just want to see see the size of it. I mean, the drone gives you a sense of it, but it really is huge. It's like an airplane hangar. I don't think you were there the day that we toured it.
You got to get in there. I haven't been in there.
Yeah, it's huge. It's like goes subterranean, and so like you're down and you're looking up, and it's like this is like a terminal of an airport. It's the biggest football building in the country. It has to be. $50 tours. All right, so Nebraska's in week 2. John Butler, the defensive coordinator, talked yesterday. I found his presser interesting. He's a terse, intense man, and gave some interesting answers, you know. There was like, I don't know, like you could almost see him in a Jason Statham movie or something.
Yeah.
You know, like he could be he could be a mechanic. He could be a guy that, he's kind of got a coiled intensity about him, a quiet, kind of tough guy, and interesting quotes. And then I think we basically talked to 3 of the 4 defensive leaders. So Elijah Judy, probably your defensive leader up front. 3 of 5. And then Javen Wright, Deshaun Singleton, Marquise Buford's already spoken. He's probably that 4th leader. And then I kind of feel like one of those other linebackers will be a leader. I don't know if it's going to be Marquise Watson-Trent or if it's going to be Vincent Shavers, but I think you'll see another one of those guys be a leader. That unit, their vision for how good they want that unit to be is really fierce. I don't know if you gleaned anything yesterday that intrigued you about what they're talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, you talk about John Butler, first of all, like his reticence to compliment or address, really talk about any individual player was interesting. And, like, I think there could be a number of reasons for that. He's getting to know those guys. You don't want to upset anybody else on the pecking order. You don't want to talk somebody else up in this time when there's no spring game because you're trying to kind of hold back maybe some of what your players are doing. Maybe that's just not how he rolls. But then he did the same thing with Mike Eckler when he was asked about, hey, is he working with the defense in any way? He's like, he's kind of looking off to the side, like, he's doing a good job on the special teams. So
I'm not going to answer that. Like, I was like, all right, understood.
So
understood.
So
we're keeping those things under wraps. They have a lot of defensive coaches on that side of the ball. I don't know that they need Eckler's expertise coaching linebackers.
Right.
They have Dvorak already. They got Phil Snow coaching, kind of walking around, 2 defensive line coaches. I think they got enough that Eckler can just focus. And Eckler said in his own press conference, "I'm just focusing on special teams."
He did.
That was like he mentioned that, and he said this will be the first time I really get to talk to the coaches or talk to the kickers and the punters, and so I felt like Eckler answered the question, right?
So he did. I think maybe the biggest thing I took away from Butler talking was, so like we've talked for a while about how the offense is Dana Holgerson's, and then the defense is this more kind of hive mind collaboration with Phil Snow and Matt Rule and Butler. And like hearing Butler talk again, it just kind of struck me that like this isn't a setup maybe that would work for every defensive coordinator out there. Maybe a guy with a big ego, and that was something that he mentioned was like, there's no egos in this room, and he kind of talks like that kind of a guy. You mentioned he's like a mechanic. He's kind of like a football mechanic, like tinkering, loves to do the deep dive onto the X's and O's. Doesn't have sort of the big personality that an Eckler or a Holgerson does. Like it just kind of, I felt like from hearing him talk yesterday, he's more well suited for this arrangement than a lot of different guys would be, and ultimately a lot of this feedback is going to come back to him, and he's going to make the game day decisions. But I don't know. I just felt more like it was a natural fit for what Nebraska wants to do with Butler in that spot.
I agree with you. And the reason I agree is because he had that experience in the NFL. So when he was with the Bills, obviously he had a defensive head coach. There's other guys collaborating on that side of the ball. And then when he was with the Texans, he was with Romeo Crennel. Favorite coach of mine, coached the Browns for a few years. That's my wife's favorite team. Hello, Molly. And somewhat my favorite team, too. And so we got to know Romeo very well, like his mannerisms and the things he liked to call on defense. And so I'll have to talk to Butler about that at some point. But, Crennel is a top defensive mind. He won plenty with the Patriots. So he probably understands that collaborative mindset. Again, I think on the offensive side of the ball, there's a collaboration there, but Holgerson is very clearly the voice. Mm-hmm. There's multiple voices, I think, on the defensive side of the ball, including Matt Rule. And and so I think there's things that Butler will have to navigate, but at the same time, he is going to bring some things to that scheme that are probably new even to Phil Snow. Like Butler's been in a franchise that was really good defensively, and just to be clear, there are people out there that watch more NFL or just as much NFL as I do. The Buffalo Bills had a good defense, and they didn't necessarily – I know they had Von Miller, but they didn't necessarily have superstars. They got it done with toughness and experience and technique. I would not necessarily – I don't think they had a Watt, either the JJ or the TJ.
A lot of developmental stories.
Oh, no question. So, like, the way they got things done is a little bit – now, they've got good players for sure, but – They did it a little bit differently, and schematically they're really good, and they're very good at taking the ball away, and there's just things that they're talented at, and I think a lot of that's coaching, right? And they put a lot of money into the other side of the ball, and they haven't quite figured it out until last year. Then they figured it out with Josh Allen, but they've done a really nice job on their defense of putting the pieces together and coaching it up. So I think Butler's got some experience there, and schematically they were very diverse. I mean, they did a lot of different things, and I think we saw some of that in the Pinstripe Bowl, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. I think the thing that Javen Wright, who's the oldest, one of the oldest defenders on the team, maybe the oldest in his 7th year, he said, I understand it now. I understand what teams are trying to do now defensively and like why I need to understand all the nuts and bolts and particulars. But he said he had empathy for the young guys because they're swimming in it a little bit. Because Butler's he's gonna crank it up a notch, and you do want guys to just play, right? You want to get to the point where like you're not thinking, you're just playing. Simultaneously, I've gone back and watched. I don't know. There's just moments that that linger in a coach's mind. And I knew with Tony White that first year it was that Michigan State game. Very frustrated about some third down plays that they didn't get right. And that's a game they should have won and they didn't win. And then last year it was absolutely Indiana and absolutely UCLA. And I felt like things changed after that UCLA game. I thought they begun to change after Indiana because it was like, okay, that's not who we want to be. And then they fixed some of that against Ohio State, and then against UCLA, it just wasn't there again. And so then I think is when you saw, right, we've got to start doing different things in the red zone and on third down to make our team better because this isn't working. They had a pretty good third down defense last year, but some of that was built on that game against Iowa where I don't even know if Iowa had a third down conversion. I'm not sure they did.
They're like 0 for 8 or something like that.
Something like that. So like it was one of those deals where, Nebraska's third down defense ended up being pretty sweet. They were 0 for 10.
0 for 10. Okay.
Yeah. So like if you take that 0 for 10 out, opponents were 56 for 149, and that's a little bit different number than the 56 for 159. And honestly, Boston College, they converted half against John Butler's defense, but Nebraska got them back in the I'm doing some quick math here. But, like 156 for 149 is 37.5, and that's not where they want to be. They want to be at 30 or below. That's where the best ones are. And so that'll be something to watch. I'll be curious to see. They had the back-to-back games where UCLA and USC both converted 46%. And so I think there was some frustration there, and we'll see how they fix it. Anything jump out from the players?
Well, I mean, Javen Wright's always interesting to hear from. Seventh-year guy. I thought, just in the big picture, like his talk about kind of describing himself as a bridge between two worlds, like you think about how much has changed from 2019 when he came in, and he kind of described he'd go around on his scooter and was trying to save money, and now he frames it as we're all blessed, and financially certainly, and in terms of facilities and resources and everything else. I thought that was interesting. He's sort of an interesting example of how much that's changed. Judy did strike me more as a guy who now, like, this is his time. He was a guy who could have moved on. He's a dad. But he came back and is going to be a key piece.
Probably not from nothing either. I'm guessing he came back for.
Oh, for sure.
They got him.
I mean, he could have
got a pretty good deal.
For sure. And obviously everyone knows who Nebraska's replacing there. And
he'll be good, though.
I thought he looked – I mean, we hadn't seen him talk a ton, but I thought he looked stout, bigger.
Oh, yeah.
Like ready to roll, maybe assume a bigger
Well, they trimmed him down.
role than he had.
They took 30 pounds off of him.
He looked harder, just a little more
And then
chiseled.
they put 25 pounds back on, and it's a different 25 pounds.
Yeah. So that part was interesting. I still think, we talk about how guys are going to fit into the scheme, and we saw that with Wright and with Deshaun Singleton, where, I asked Wright, like, hey, what's kind of the range of possibilities for you? And he's like, yeah, I could go anywhere from Jack to outside linebacker to in the box.
Yep.
Singleton is coming back, and Butler mentioned specifically that this is a guy who, while he's mostly played safety at Nebraska, they could be a little bit more creative with him. So, like, you have these players who you have to find spots for, and you have the defensive coordinator who's sort of keeping the 3-3-5 but kind of making it his own and taking input from everybody else. And so, like, it feels like this is something that's being built from the ground up more than most springs would be. Right. And so I just thought that was fascinating to hear from some of these players and how much they trust these coaches to say, hey, these are our skill sets. I'm willing to kind of fit in wherever. And I got the sense that even they don't really have a strong idea necessarily at this moment where they're going to fit into that scheme in the fall.
There's a part of me that wonders if we're ever going to get to the point where they talk about defensive alignments in football more accurately. Like they say things like 3-1-2-1-4. Because that's kind of what's going on. Like, there's a lot of times there's a guy that's down on the line of scrimmage, and the reality is he could be a defensive lineman or he could be a linebacker. You have guys that could be a linebacker or it could be a nickel, whatever you want to call it. What I'll be intrigued to see is whether John Butler keeps the split safety concept. In other words, 3 deep safeties with one guy who's kind of in the middle of the field and then a post safety, however you want to call that. I'm curious to see if that other safety, that middle guy, which could in theory be Singleton, comes down and plays nickel and is all of a sudden in a slot position and doing different things, almost like a 4-2-5. One of the challenges that you have when you play in the Big Ten is the variety of styles that you're going to see. You're going to see teams that sort of maul it up right? They're going to play Minnesota and Iowa next year, and those two teams are going to put you in an alleyway. They're going to compress their formations. They're going to run power. They're going to run, a great zone play, and they're going to hit you in the mouth. And Nebraska's actually shown the ability to stop those teams under Matt Rule. Mm-hmm. That they gave up 13 to Minnesota. They gave up 13 to Iowa twice. They've shown the ability. They have struggled actually more with the shotgun spread teams. They struggled with Indiana. They struggled with UCLA, although UCLA was pro-style. They struggled with USC. USC's run game made Nebraska struggle. They did not stop USC's run game at all. And so I feel like one of the things that Nebraska's got to try to walk the line on is, okay, we have the ability to go out and beat the meat and potato offense. Can we beat a spread offense that knows how to put athletes on the field more like an old Big 12 team? Now, when they played in the Big 12, Bo Pelini understood it.
They recruited to it.
But he also understood it. And so, one of the things that he used in 2009, 2010, the last 2 years he was in, was kind of a match zone concept where if a guy comes in your area, you're manning him up. But when he leaves your area, you pass him over. And so on and so forth. And, it creates a man concept underneath with safeties in the back, and it's very hard for quarterbacks because you always have two guys deep. And so it's hard to hit the pass over the top, but it's hard to hit the short thing too. And I'll be curious to see, if I didn't see Nebraska do a ton of that last year. I feel like they were doing a lot of drops. They weren't as effective in their linebacker coverage. When Princewell Umanyoan had to drop back, that wasn't a great picture. It just wasn't. Mm-hmm. That wasn't his thing. You know whose thing it will be? Deshaun McCullough. He can do it.
Yeah, he can.
So I'll be curious to see how they handle spread teams when they run the ball and throw the ball. And are you using man concepts underneath, or are you doing whatever? And again, I'm not a coach. I'm not a former player. I'm just an amateur talking about football. But Butler's got the whole thing in his repertoire. He's got all of it. And so I'll be really curious to see what they do, whether they're able to advance their pass defense, because their pass defense last year wasn't very good. It just wasn't. Well, it wasn't that it wasn't very good. It wasn't good enough, and it wasn't up to the standard that Matt Rule set, which is basically the best in the country relative to your talent. I don't know what the best pass defensive in the country was, but relative to your talent, you should have the fifth best. That's what they thought they would get, and they didn't get it.
Do you feel like Nebraska's players defensively need more defined roles? And I guess what I mean is, I feel like since they've gone to the 3-3-5, there's been more of an emphasis on, he's kind of a hybrid this in the front end or a hybrid that in the back end. And while the positives could include confusing defenses and not knowing if a guy's going to drop back or rush, I just wonder if sometimes that can make it more difficult to really thrive or excel or have a specialty for a specific player too. Do you think this is something that's sort of going to be ongoing for Nebraska, where they have these tweeners that are athletic but you don't know where they fit, or is that something maybe they need to get away from to get closer to what you're talking about?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure. I so many of the variables you play in there. I think that's a question you should ask Rule. Seriously. Now maybe he can't answer that right this moment. Maybe that's an off to the side question or a training camp question, but it's a great question. And when Nebraska's been really good, Evan, and this goes all the way back to the, not 1983, but when Nebraska's been good from 1992 on, it's because they were completely in sync with what the defense required and what it was in terms of its identity and the willingness to go out and do it. So the McBride defenses, when they got great, they got the guys you're talking about, and their alignment fit with their vision, right, or whatever. Mm-hmm. It aligned.
Yeah.
And then that was true until the day Charlie McBride retired in 99. And then Bo gets there in 2003, and it perfectly aligned. And then we had the Cosgrove years, and that didn't go so well. It just didn't. Cosgrove didn't really fit the Big 12, and he wasn't very good against spread offenses. Then Bo gets there, and Bo mastered that. Then they go to the Big 10, and they really could not handle the Wisconsin linemen, the size, they had to gain weight. By the time they finally did, he was out. And then it didn't get a ton better under Riley. And then Chenander, who I think is a hell of a coach, he was dealing with a tough situation. His 2021 defense was excellent. And they finally got it. Remember, they had JoJo as an overhang player, and he could basically do anything. And they finally figured it out for the 1 year, and then they had all those close losses, and the offense kept shooting itself in the foot. And I always think if they'd gone 9-4 that year, well, 1, Frost wouldn't have been fired the following year, but 2, they would have figured it out, but they didn't. And then they get to 22 and shoot. We're watching the game in Ireland. You're watching it here. I was watching it there, and I'm like, this ain't the defense that anybody thought they were going to have.
Right.
So the question that you're asking is a great one. Rule has shown that he understands how to stop the majority. I mean, they can stop the Big Ten offenses. The more challenging thing is when Indiana rolls out there with 3 and 4 wides and they're throwing back shoulder fades. It's just, they got to get a little better there. And I think they will. And I don't have any insight on what they're going to do with their coverage strategies. I'm just saying that these like John Butler can get complex. He can do whatever they need him to do. And that's probably why he has the job. And that's probably part of why Phil Snow is there, because Phil Snow knows it all inside and out. And yeah, so I think that we'll see where it goes.